In this video, I want to show you how to knit Granite Stitch. This stitch is just a 4-row repeat, but as you can see, that 4-row repeat gives you loads and loads of texture, so it's a really fun one to try if you want loads of texture but you don't want a really long repeat to tackle. It's not a reversible stitch, so if I flip it over, you can see that the back does not look the same as the front. Again, I say this with a lot of stitches, it's not ugly, it just doesn't really have any sort of defined pattern on the reverse side, whereas the right side does have a very definite pattern to it. What this stitch is also really useful for is practicing working a decrease in the form of a knit 2 together and an increase in the form of a knit front back, because you have whole rows where you are working just knit 2 together and then also a whole row when you are working knit front back. So it's a really good one for someone who's just getting to grasps with decreases and increases and wants a stitch to practice them with, but might also want to get a finished product out of that practice as well. The pattern multiple for Granite Stitch is really simple. You just need to make sure that you cast on an even number of stitches. As long as your stitch count is an even number, then you're going to be fine. An odd number will mean that you can't work that decrease row without having an odd stitch left at the end of the row, and then that stops the whole stitch pattern from being able to work cohesively. I'm just going to cast on a very small sample today of 20 stitches, but you can cast on as many or as few as you like. And I'm going to use the long tail cast on method, but again, you can work whichever cast on method you feel most comfortable with. The odd numbers in this stitch pattern form the right side of the work, so that means whenever you are knitting an odd numbered row, you will have the right side of your work facing you. For row 1, you are just going to quite simply knit every stitch all the way across. So there are no other stitches worked in this row except for knit stitches. Along row 2, we are going to work those decreases that we talked about. So that means that by the end of row 2, you should have half the amount of stitches that you had when you started row 2. So I'm going into row 2 with 20 stitches. By the end of row 2, I should just have 10. We are going to work a knit 2 together decrease all the way along our row. And that is quite simply knitting 2 stitches at the same time instead of 1. So you are going to get your needle and pop it through the first 2 stitches on your needle instead of just the first stitch of your needle like you would do if you were knitting each stitch. Then you're going to pull up your loop and slide both stitches off your needle, and you've gone from 2 stitches down to 1. And you are going to repeat that process of knitting 2 together all the way along row 2. So as I said a minute ago, you should start row 2, in my case, with 20 stitches, and you should end row 2 with half the amount that you started with. So in my case, I'll be ending my row with just 10 stitches on this right hand needle. During row 3, we are going to work all the way across, working our knit front back increases. So across row 3, we are going to increase back up to the original amount of stitches that we had. So in my case, that means during row 3, I'm going to be going from 10 stitches on my needles back up to the original 20 that I had. And the type of increase we're working on row 3 is a knit front back increase. And if you're not familiar with that, I will just go over it with you now. So what you are going to do is you're going to start your stitch as you normally would. So you're going to put your needle through your stitch and pull up a loop, but the crucial bit here is that you do not want to drop that stitch off your left hand needle just yet. So pop your thumb on the loop that you have pulled up, and then you might want to just hold that stitch in place with your index finger on your left hand needle, and you are going to swing your right hand needle back round, and you're going to go into the stitch from front through to back, pick up a second loop, and once you've drawn up that second loop and it's securely on your right hand needle, you can let go of it from your left hand needle, and you can see that we have worked 1 stitch and turned it into 2 stitches. So just once more, you are going to start your stitch as normal, but then instead of letting this loop fall off your left hand needle, you're going to swing your knitting needle back round, pop it through from front to back so that you've got the back leg of that stitch picked up, pick up a second loop, pull it through the middle of the stitch, and then slide it off that left hand needle. And you're going to repeat that for every single stitch along the row. So you're going to work that knit front back increase for every stitch in the row, and by the end of the row you should be back up to your original amount of stitches. So by the end of row 3 for me, I will be back up to the 20 stitches that I originally cast on. Row 4 is the very last row of our repeat, and for this row it's a really nice simple row. You are going to work your way along and purl every single stitch. So just like with the other rows, there are no variation of stitches across the row, and for row 4 your stitch that you are going to work all the way across your row is a purl stitch. So you're just going to start and purl from beginning to end. So that's your 4-row repeat covered. To grow your project you would now go back to row 1 and work rows 1 to 4 once more, and then repeat that process until your project is the size that you want it. When it comes to casting off your work, I would recommend that you cast off after a row 3 and that you cast off knitwise. So instead of your row of purls, you would cast off knitwise on that row 4, but working knit stitches instead of purl stitches. Just a couple of final bits and bobs before I go. This stitch pattern, because of the way that the decreases and increases are worked, if you don't add a selvage, has a habit of kicking out and looking bumpy on the sides. So here I have added a 2-stitch selvage and I've knitted every one of those 2 stitches, so you get a little garter stitch border running up your side edges. And what that does is it just gives you a really nice, neat, straight, flat edge. You could take that a step further and add a garter stitch border all the way around and turn this into a washcloth, or you could go even bigger and work this stitch all the way up and create a baby blanket. You really can scale this stitch up quite easily. That's all for this video, but before I go, I'll leave you with another video of mine to inspire you, just in case you're not quite ready to go away and start knitting.